It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline. Okay, now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily with positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
It's time to talk soccer and equal pay, in women's soccer that is. So joining us this week on Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington, we've got former professional goalkeeper, recent founder of Soccer Family Agent, and a former FIFA soccer agent. That is Miro Gladovic from down in Tampa, Florida. Miro, welcome to the show this week.
Thank you, Renee. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. This is a discussion that I have had with so many people because the excitement around the World Cup and also the conversations that it opened by what the women were able to do with really speaking up on equal pay has made this an issue that, you know, country to country, state to state, sport to sport, everyone is really now focusing on. So what are your thoughts on equal pay and what needs to happen to make it possible?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's the most opportune time to discuss it with the World Cup and obviously with the success of the U.S. Women's national team, who did an amazing job. I mean, it's a very relevant conversation and one that's rarely touched upon in sport. I probably think the last time it was discussed in terms of equal pay in men and women was probably professional tennis. It was actually the reverse discussion or argument where a lot of people are saying that because women only played 3 sets versus the men 5 sets, they don't deserve the equal pay at Grand Slams. But, you know, this is a unique situation because the U.S. women's national team are really an anomaly in world sports because, you know, not only do they dominate the world landscape as a team, but you know, they've done something in the U.S. which is a rarity in world soccer, and that is eclipse the men's team, which they have, especially in the last 5 years.
Right. That's a good point. And something that I know, you know, in the past, it was always the national team, the U.S. national team, and the U.S. women's national team. You know, we always have to, for female sports, we always find ourselves having to say women, male, where you don't do that with the men. But now we can say that for the women's soccer team, now that they have, you know, won another World Cup as being the best in the world, and the men's team not having that same success, they now have risen and proven themselves as more than just being a women's team. You know, they're the U.S. national team. And so this is a great time, and you see them speaking up about it. So I know a lot of people always bring up percentages. You know, if you look at the percentage of what the men make to how the revenue they bring in, that's why women's sports don't make money. How do you think things have to change so that it's not based on percentage, but it's based on more than that and based on the talent, based on, you know, the fact that the U.S. women's national team is the best in the world. They should be paid like so.
And again, that's a very relevant question. And again, it's such a unique situation because in any given sport, whether it's the NBA or the NFL or the English Premier League, players are paid according to the prize pool, and that's obviously negotiated by player unions and so forth. So what players get paid as a percentage of the prize pool is how it's calculated. But it's a very unique situation, this, because it only pertains to the women's national team. And national team soccer is not like club soccer, so this doesn't affect the 200-odd women that play in the National Women's Soccer League, which is the top professional league in the U.S. This only affects the 23-player squad that is the U.S. women's national team. But going back to the earlier point about the prize pool, this is where it gets a bit murky because obviously the U.S. Soccer Federation basically operate the men's and the women's national team under their umbrella. So only they're really privy as to what, you know, they get in terms of money for TV, for sponsorships, for, you know, bums on seats tickets. So, but it's very interesting because at this time you have the women's national team, as you said, enjoying incredible success, and the men's national team failed to even qualify for the Olympics, for the World Cup last year in Russia. So they have every right to mount this case for equal pay because there's quite a discrepancy, especially when it comes to, for example, the win bonuses for the men's at about $17,000 a game versus like $1,300 for the women.
Right. It's incredible. It's astonishing to see the numbers and the differences in pay. I mean, that's something that I know I've gotten into with people over social media. Like, this is not a couple of dollars that we're talking about difference. You know, they're getting significantly less than what the men are getting. You know, and at a level, as you mentioned, that's way higher than where the men are performing. They're outperforming them, but getting paid less. So you, being a former FIFA agent, you have worked with contract negotiations. You know, especially with World Cup players over the years. So you've been in the conversation. Is it something that maybe needs to happen with agents or who? I don't even. It's like working with endorsements, working with leagues, working with whoever to just get these players more money. How is it from an agent perspective to make it more possible? How does that happen?
Yeah, again, that's a great question. Here again, it's different rules because you're talking about a national team versus a club. So in club negotiations, there's collective bargaining agreements, there's parameters that agents can work within. But again, all bets are off when it comes to national team play because that is basically regulated by FIFA and confederations. And it's a different playing field for men and women because obviously the Men's World Cup is the biggest tournament in the world and the Women's World Cup doesn't compare in terms of the prize pool. So, but again, you go back to that earlier point that I made, the U.S. men's team are not even qualifying for this prize pool. So last year, they could have basically got upwards of $10 million if they qualified for the Russia World Cup and made it past group stage. Whereas the women, it's already mandated by FIFA, according to the prize pool of the Women's World Cup, they went all the way and they won $2 million as a team. Whereas France, France won the World Cup last year, the Men's World Cup in Russia, and they got $40 million compared to what the U.S. women's team got, which is $2 million. So the U.S. women's team can't really go to FIFA and say, well, we want $40 million, we want equal pay as France, because, again, the ratings and the money that comes in from the Men's World Cup is, you can't even compare. That's a drop in the ocean when you compare it to the Women's World Cup. But you can go to the U.S. Federation and say, hey, your boys didn't make the World Cup last year. They missed out on $15, $20 million. They weren't on the world stage. We are bringing in most of the revenue. We are bringing in the eyeballs, the visibility for televised games. And they have every right. I mean, I love soccer, obviously, and I can safely say that in the last 5 years, I think the percentage of games that I've watched the U.S. national team women versus the men are probably 80% women's and 20% men. So, they are, I think, much more popular than the men's soccer team at the moment, given their great success and the failure of the U.S. men's team to make the World Cup.
Yeah. And you bring up some really good points that I have to hit on. First of all, the numbers, again, we talk about it. Those aren't small numbers. That's a huge difference when you're talking $40 million to $2 million or $10 million for just making it out of group play versus $2 million for winning the entire World Cup. That's unbelievably it's disrespectful. They have a right to be upset. And more importantly, when you look at what the women's national team has done here in the United States, I still coach youth soccer. I'm out at games as a sports reporter, as a coach. I'm still out around the community. When I look on the fields of a practice, of a camp, the jerseys I see for the men's side, Messi. The jerseys I see for the women's side, Alex Morgan. I saw Julie Ertz. These are the things that you see. You see our U.S. women's national team is highly, that's the jerseys that girls are buying. For the men's side, it's not the same. You don't have people going out buying Christian Pulisic's jersey. I mean, more now. He's become more of a household name, but go through the roster. How many players are little boys and girls looking up to on the U.S. side? Whereas now, especially after the U.S. women's national team won the World Cup, boys and girls at all ages are now aspiring to be like, Megan Rapinoe or Tobin Heath or Alex Morgan or Carly Lloyd. They're looking up to them. So they're not only bringing excitement around the sport, which we both know as as former players, that's what you want. But they're also making it a household name. They're giving kids an inspiration to want to be like them. They want to grow up to be like them, and that's not something that we always have in soccer. You don't always have idols. So I guess
Absolutely.
My question for you, hypothetically, because this is similar to me with the question in the college side with should NCAA athletes get paid? How does that happen? It's something that there's a lot of gray area to make it possible. But for you, and I know I keep asking as an agent, I keep putting on you, but what do you think
okay.
it's really going? You talk about going into the federation and speaking. Do you think it's something as extreme as maybe a strike? As maybe the players have to come together? Like, I don't know what extreme measures need to happen beyond just conversations, if anything. Maybe it's not that.
That's a great point. And I just want to touch upon something that you said earlier as well, the relevance of, kids wanting to emulate the U.S. women's national team players versus the men's. I'm a soccer fan and I work, obviously, in the soccer world, but aside from Christian Pulisic, I could probably struggle to name, one or two or three more U.S. men's national team players, whereas, I could probably name most of the U.S. women's national starters. So you're absolutely right about that. Now, in terms of going a strike route, I think that's really a good option because they can pick and choose what they can strike. Because as you know, or a lot of people may not know, the World Cup only comes around every 4 years, and qualifying starts, about 18 months, 2 years before that. And then there's obviously the Olympic Games, which is the other major tournament. But most of these national teams, they play basically friendly games, which are dead rubbers. They're just to basically keep the national team in unison and playing together. And they play every few months. So, but these friendly games, which don't mean anything in terms of qualifying, they do rake in a lot of revenue for the U.S. Soccer Federation in terms of television and ticket sales and sponsorship. So, and like I said, the women only get paid about $1,300 for a win, and I think nothing for a loss. So I think strike action on these games that don't affect qualification for major tournaments is a really good option for the women's national team.
Yeah, I think it has to happen, and I like that you bring up the international friendlies because that's a good chance to take something that's not as valuable, but that FIFA and that internationally is valued, and to really make a statement. So I do have to ask you, because you're working behind the scenes to try to make some sort of an impact and change, and you recently founded Soccer Family Agent. So tell us about that and why you really thought it was important now to get that off the ground and really help with the next generation.
Well, one of the things that I've observed since I moved to the States over 10 years ago is the U.S. has probably the greatest talent pool of young soccer players, male and female, yet it doesn't really export a lot of players, especially to the top leagues of Europe. And that was my niche, my forte back when I was in Australia. I exported young Australian players to leagues all over Europe, including Germany and the Premier League. And I've noticed that there is a lack of numbers when it comes to U.S. men, particularly men, because there's probably more women playing in leagues all over Europe, and even in my native Australia. Every single professional women's team has at least one female American player, and I don't know that there's even one American male player. So I founded Soccer Family Agent, which is basically, it really cultivates FIFA and US soccer regulation that allows for a family member, be it a parent or a sibling, to become the legal agent of a soccer player and then go out and cultivate professional opportunities overseas where they would not normally get them domestically.
I like that. That makes sense. So I mean, that's a great point. I know a lot of women's soccer players that I played with that played or even still play internationally because of equal pay, because they maybe are afforded more opportunity in another, in Europe or a different country to get a better salary and be able to make a living off of playing soccer. So not everybody knows of those opportunities, though, and you're bringing awareness to it, which is tremendous.
And when you look at the numbers, there's only 9 professional women's teams in the US and only, I think, 24 Major League Soccer teams, whereas you have over 250 professional women's teams all over the world and over 2,000 men's teams professional in Europe alone, let alone Asia and South America. So Most of the professional opportunities for male and female American players lay overseas, but most people don't know how to cultivate these opportunities. And with only 100 registered agents in the U.S. who mainly take care of already established professionals locally, they're not going to want to help an unknown, unproven, non-professional get their first opportunity overseas. So our platform basically not only teaches parents and siblings how to become qualified professional agents, it gives them the roadmap with nearly 10,000 links to every professional soccer team and agent all over the world.
Right. That's much needed, because I feel like that on a bigger spectrum allows for more young boys and girls to aspire to be professional soccer players. You know, when you think about the sport as a whole, in order for it to grow, it has to be something that every kid, whether they're, you know, at the youth level, high school, college, can see themselves playing for the next 10, 20 years and making a living and enjoying it, you know, and that's something that would help at the national level with the World Cup, with, you know, all the international games and tournaments and European League, everything that we have in the world, to just kind of bring it together, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's much needed.
And it's important because, you know, I had this conversation with a coach the other day, and, you know, he was basically weighing up whether a young player should go to college and play on a college scholarship versus going to Europe. And he said, you know, basically, you go to college, you're limited in terms of the amount of games. You can only play about 5 months out of the year and only train within NCAA parameters, versus if you go even to a second or third division team in Europe, you'll be playing 11 months out of the year and probably 2 games a week. So you're going to develop
getting
in those
paid to
3
do it.
years. Exactly. Versus, you know, being in college. But if you want to obviously go to college and get a degree, you know, that's your prerogative. But if you really want to become a professional, going to Europe as young as age as possible is the thing to do.
Yeah, and we even see that with the academy programs that teams have, you know, and not just in the United States. I know they're the Philadelphia Union, different teams, Red Bulls, they're starting to work at the academy level. We know that clubs internationally in Europe have that as well, so you can be a part of Barcelona's academy team, and then they allow you to now start to train at a higher level versus just being a part of a mom-and-pop town team. And even having you, instead of just going to school and now you're in class until 4, then playing high school soccer, you're now working your soccer schedule into your training, and it's becoming, you know, you're a true student athlete. So I love what you're doing. Where can we follow you, for those that are listening that don't know? Where are you on social media so that they can keep up with all that you're doing in the soccer world?
Well, there's a website, soccerfamilyagent.com, and I guess Instagram at Miro Gladovic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this week. It has been a pleasure having you. Guys, make sure you give Miro a follow, and it's time to get some equal pay around here. So thank you so much.